Hi, dear audience. Today we are going to discuss what is literary criticism. Actually, my different students have been questioning me and they have been complaining as well. And even by its title, means criticism seems some sort of very boring. Students claim that it's ununderstandable for them. As you know, they are usually accustomed and trained to get some summary or some story in the fiction, but where in criticism they have some sort of preoccupation that criticism means is to criticize. So inherently it is supposed to have a negative meaning. Therefore, I have come across my students who have been complaining about the negative impact of criticism or negative preoccupations. And then they are also very much concerned with the word literary and criticism. Means here one of my students said that I'm unable to find anything literary in the criticism. So that's very interesting debate. Means, is there anything literary in criticism, and what's the relationship of criticism with the literariness? So we would be going to discuss in our coming slides. And before going to forward, I am going to make an means a statement that there cannot be any literature without criticism, and there cannot be any criticism without literature. So criticism and literature are very interlinked, and they are so interlinked as they are appearing in this our heading. Means literary is next to criticism, and criticism is very pre-joiner of the literary. So Matthew Arnold is a famous critic of the 19th century. He has means how he has described the word literary criticism as a disinterested endeavor to learn and to propagate the best that is known and thought in the world. Means he has taken it as an endeavor to learn, and first to learn and then to propagate. Means learning, acquiring a something, and then its propagation. What is the that's the best known and thought in the world. So we would be implicitly in this definition is that the literary criticism is a disciplined activity. It is not a very just making a bare sphere criticism on any of fiction. Means if you suppose yourself to be a critic, you read a novel, and by the reading of the end of that novel you say it's the very nonsense, it's foolish, it was disgusting. So it's not the criticism. But for example, if you are a critic, then you have to acquire you have to keep in mind some established rules of criticism as well, some parameters of criticism. You have to make your argument, you may have to make your objection through a method, through a theory. You cannot criticize any sort of fiction or any piece of literature without the understanding of a particular theory or methodology. So it's very disciplined, it's very organized activity. And what's the aim of that activity? That is to study, to analyze, to interpret, and to evaluate a work of art. I have been questioned for many times that is criticism is to criticize negatively and this and that. Is it the fault finding in the piece of fiction like this? So criticism is not basically a fault finding, it is the evaluation of that work of art. And if there had not been any evaluation of this any sort of the work of art, then it does not get its worth. So any fiction work, a piece of poetry, if it is not going to be evaluated by the criticism, then it will lose its literariness, its worth. So it is the duty of the critic, it is the one critic who, you know, invent the reinvent. I'm going to use both words, invent and reinvent, the value of that fiction, value of that art. If artist is the creator, if fiction writer is the creator of then that art, then critic is the founder, discoverer, evaluator of the value of that piece of art. So both are important. Fiction writer, poet, dramatist, means the artist is important and the critic is important. So they are very one is going to create the meaning, and other is to extract the meaning, other is going to make it more explicit to the words. By necessity, Arnold would argue, this discipline attempts to formulate aesthetic and methodological principles on the basis of which the critic can evaluate a text. So when we consider its function and its relationship to the text, literary criticism is not usually considered as a discipline in itself, for it must be related to something else. It's more interdisciplinary. That is a work of art, means criticism does not exist. It is such a discipline which is based on the art, which is more based on the genre and discipline of the art, except criticism. It itself is not some sort of discipline. So as it is through this discerning activity, those questions that help define our humanity, evaluate our actions, or simply increase our appreciation and enjoyment of the both literary work and our fellow human beings, that how their behaviors have been over there. So when analyzing a work of art, literary critics ask the basic questions concerning the philosophical, psychological, functional, and descriptive nature of a text. If we take, I'm not a moralist. I have never been looking the fiction through some particular lens. Means any part of art, whether it's painting, whether it's poetry, whether it's drama, whether it's novel, that can be communicating a philosophy, a particular philosophy that might be striking or elaborating some particular psychological phenomena, that might be creating a particular social value, that might be describing some socio-economic phenomena in the society. So art is both for art's sake, art is both for life's sake, art is both for philosophy's sake, art is both for as a social agent of social change. So art is everything. I can perceive, and my understanding about art is that art is everything. So but basic questions are going to be of major underlying basic necessity of the critic, is that he might be asking philosophical questions, that what sort of philosophy this particular text is going to propagate. He might be asking some psychological questions, functional questions, descriptive nature of the text. So a text is not criticized just or evaluated by just the story, that in which movement the story moves. So it has also multiple interpretations. For example, if some story, you might have heard about that cycle of there is introduction of the story, then there is the rise of an action, then there is the climax, then there is fall of an action, and then there is a denouement. So the story, there are some possibilities. The story might be in flashback, means from the introduction to from the back to, it might be going to the introduction, and from introduction into it might be going to the end. But it's not only that if you are going to analyze a piece of fiction, you have to evaluate, you have to look that from where the story is going to start and where it is going to end, whether the goodness is justified or not, whether bad has been punished or not. Only these are not the function of criticism in a text. So it might be the more psychological, philosophical, functional, descriptive. So multiple parameters are of the criticism. Since the time of the Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle, the answers to these questions have been seriously debated. Means since there has been the criticism, since there has been the fiction basically, since there is the criticism. By asking the questions of Taiwan's or any other literary text, by contemplating answers, we can become the participants in this debate. Means through that criticism, we basically the critic becomes the part of that debate, and it is a question of the critics which makes us understanding about that debate. Means that debate in the fiction is created through the critic. It's only the critic who makes a new dimension and new dimensions of interpretations for the readers. So, critic holds an important and significant position in the evaluation of art. Here I have taken just some example from the Taiwan's novel, but we are going to nextly. So what is the traditional function of a literary critic is they involve themselves in some either theatrical or practical criticism. So there are two dimensions of criticism. Theoretical means they develop a theory, and the other is practical criticism. So there are some critics who create their theory and then they practice it on some particular fiction. So theoretical criticism is the development of theory of criticism, and practical criticism is the practicing or analysis of a particular theory on a particular work of art. Theoretical criticism formulates theories. For example, if we talk about the feminism was basically a movement. So different theorists have been talking about the feminism. I mean, Virginia Woolf has been there. Virginia Woolf contributed to the theory of feminism in her own understanding. Then there have been Sarah Mills and all these. They have been developing. They have been contributing to the theory by their own perspective. So that was a theoretical development of criticism. And the tenets regarding the nature and the value of the art. By citing general aesthetic and moral principle of the art, theatrical criticism provides the necessary frameworks for practical criticism. So theoretical criticism and practical criticism, they are very much interlinked. That means there cannot be any practical criticism without a theory, and theory is of no use if it is not going to be applied on a particular fiction. So they are very interlinked. Practical criticism, known as applied criticism, then applies the theories and the tenets of those theoretical criticism to a particular works, as you may see in that Huxley, Finn, for example. So moving to the conclusion, we can say that there is a distinction between the practical critic who posts those means tenets are some particular principles on a fiction, evaluating the literary text. The absolutist critic, one is the absolutist critic and other is the relativistic critics. Means who absolutist literary critic is the one who just develop theory without understanding, without having any preoccupation of the fiction. For example, as has been the Karl Marx. And then there is the relativistic critics who employs the various and even contradictory theories in critiquing a piece of literature. The basis, however, for either kind of the critic or for any form of criticism is the literary theory. Now, in our next our lecture, our talk, we would be going to have a talk on the literary theory. What is the literary theory? Means without theory there is no practical criticism, This is our understanding, and without any literature there is not any literary theory. So their criticism, theory, and fiction or literature, they are very interlinked. They cannot be separated from with one another. So in our next talk we would be going to look at the literary theory. What is the difference? But this was all about literary criticism. Now we would be evaluating our different theories and what is a role of theory, how the theory is developed. This literary criticism is the major domain, is an umbrella, means we have up to here developed that what is the function of criticism, what a critics do. So in our next talk we would be going to discuss means how a literary work is developed through the theory. Theory is basically a tool of evaluation. So we would be talking on that in our next coming talk. Up to that, goodbye, thank you.